The workspace is a costly resource for any organisation, as are the people that work within it. So how the two work together is an important consideration for any organisation or business. Over the last couple of years, myself and a couple of other researchers from Sheffield Business School have developed an approach that considers both the physical layout of a workspace and the way that people interact within that space. We can use the results to provide advice on how you can make the most out of your workspace. And we're going to now outline that approach for you.
There are a number of methods that we can use to understand the workspace. The first that we'll take a look at is space syntax analysis. This has been used a great deal to understand the way in which people use physical space. Space can be broken down into various components, and we can understand these from a network perspective. By breaking down space into these components, we can understand the connectivity of spaces, the way in which people move around space and how people use space, and also the depth, the remoteness of spaces. From the images that you can see here, our typical workspace is broken down into red spaces of high connectivity through to blue spaces of high privacy and depth. Being located in the red spaces would mean that you have a much greater chance of interaction and connection with your colleagues. Those that are located in the deeper spaces are more likely to be perhaps more remote and less accessible to their colleagues. The next method that we can look at is social network analysis. By asking people a variety of questions about who they go to for new ideas, who they might go to for technical expertise, for help and advice, we can build up a network picture of how that organisation is structured from a social perspective. And we can visualise that in 2 dimensions, as you can see here, giving a sense of key players in terms of those that might help their colleagues and give important advice to their colleagues. Or we can look at it in 3 dimensions. Here we've used a tool that's actually been developed for looking at entities in molecular biology. We can rotate and view the network in 3 dimensions to get a real sense of the structure of that social network in the workplace. In this image, people are represented by nodes in a network connected by lines. This shows who goes to whom for expert advice and for information that helps them do their daily job. The key players are the larger icons, and these represent the people that are more likely to help people on a daily basis. To support the methods that you've seen so far, we also use observational techniques to get a sense of how people move around the workspace, how they physically use the workspace, who they interact with. Finally, we use interviews to get a sense of the cultural dynamic in the workspace, people's personal perspectives on the way in which they work on a daily basis.
When we've used this approach in organisations, we found that it provides a wide range of benefits. One of those is around providing an insight into how the organisation works, and often this is different to how the formal structures of an organisation suggest it should work. So for instance, it's a good way of identifying who rising stars are, where the bottlenecks are, and who the key decision makers are. One of the other benefits of this approach is that it's a useful tool for identifying where to locate individuals within a workspace. So for instance, where should those people that need confidential space be seated? Where should those that need less confidential space and more interaction be seated? And even insights into sort of where introverts and extroverts might be better seated in the workspace, and how to create a noise gradient across the space so that people are seated in areas that are suitable for them. A final benefit of this approach that we've seen is the ability to change and adapt the existing workspace in organisations. So organisations can identify how well the workspace is working for them and adapt it accordingly. So that might be moving people around or introducing new types of furniture or altering the position of things like water coolers and photocopiers to improve collaboration amongst members of the organisation.
The space syntax analysis was really interesting because looking at the way that work flows throughout our shared accommodation, it's become clear that there are clusters and individuals within those clusters who are probably not as positioned as well as they could be. So as a result of that analysis, we've decided to move 1 or 2 key people around in order to improve communications within the Research Institute based on the space syntax results that we got from the research. One of the really interesting findings that we had from the work was the social spaces that were provided were not being used, and areas which were not social spaces were actually heavily used for more personal interactions. As a result of this, we've decided to reinstate some old practices around trying to encourage staff to meet socially, a tea club and a sort of tea and biscuits afternoon once a week, And also in the new accommodation, we're going to actually create a social area which is specifically designed around the requirements of the staff.